Nazareth Village is an outdoor museum in Nazareth, Israel, that reconstructs and reenacts village life in Galilee in the time of Jesus. This is John Miller at the wine press. You see the white rock, and that's where they press the grapes, and it runs down into this hole. Here's Kim looking at this tomb. This was found on the property, so it's kind of indicative of the first century tombs that were prevalent during this time. Here Kim is looking at the inside. With her is Aaron, John's son.
You'll notice that there are several different layers. So we have the wooden beams that are going across for the first layer, and then above that we have some reeds for the next layer. What you can't see is that on top of the reeds we have 3 more layers. So we have a layer of a mud mixture, similar to what we create the walls out of, a layer of dry dirt, and then another layer of the mud mixture. And this is the way that they would keep the rain out. So the mud and dry dirt would either absorb or repel the rainwater, and then it would keep them dry on the inside. And you can imagine, if you guys are familiar with the story of Jesus in the house in Capernaum, when 3 people dug through the roof and lowered their friend down before him. If you imagine a roof something like this, you can see how easy that would have been. All you would have had to do is have a hard stick or stone, dig through the first 3 layers, break the reeds, and then lower your friend between the beams. Now, these beams are kind of close together, but we believe that they actually would have been farther apart in this time. We had to make them this way for safety regulations. So the synagogue was used for a variety of different things. It was used, of course, for reading the law of Moses, but it was also just a general gathering place. So it could be used as a community center, a courthouse, a place to hold community meetings, and then, as I said, a place to come and gather on the Sabbath to read from the law of Moses and from the prophets. So they would have read the scriptures from scrolls, something like this, made of leather. And then when they were finished reading from a specific scroll, they kept them in a jar, like what you can see here, and kept them in the corner room off to the side there. And so, as I meant, in Luke chapter 4, Jesus is reading in a synagogue. He is invited to come up and read from the prophet Isaiah. So he comes up, and what he reads goes something like this. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free and to declare the year of the Lord's favor. Then he rolled up the scroll, handed it back to the attendant, and sat down. So at this moment, all eyes in the room were on him. This was a really big deal because after he sat down, Jesus said, "Today in your hearing, this scripture is fulfilled." So what he basically was telling them was that he was the Messiah. This was a messianic prophecy that was talking about the coming Messiah that the Jews were waiting for. So this was a big deal. The people were in awe at first when they heard this. Like, what? This guy is claiming to be the Messiah, the guy that we have been waiting for so long? There was maybe some confusion as well. They were like, isn't this Joseph's son? The man who grew up as a carpenter? The man we pressed grapes with on the wine press? We know this man. Can he truly be the Messiah? But they were excited. But after a bit, their excitement turned into anger. Now, why would their excitement turn from joy into anger? Well, this is because of what Jesus continues to say after reading the scripture. He goes on to tell them of 2 stories from what we know today as the book of Kings. The first is the story of the leper Naaman being healed from leprosy, and the second is the story of God saving the widow of Zarephath from a famine. Now, these are 2 good stories of God doing miracles, performing wondrous works, so why would this make the people mad? Well, if you think about the context of who Jesus was talking about in these stories, these were 2 people who were not Jews. they were Gentile people, and stories of God saving them. So by sharing these stories, Jesus was proclaiming that he was not only coming back to save the Jews, but that he was also the Messiah of the Gentiles, the people who were not a part of the Jewish nation. Now this is what angered them. They were waiting for a Jewish Messiah. They were waiting for somebody who would come and be a political leader to drive out their enemies. They had been oppressed. They were living under oppression from the Romans, and they were waiting for someone to come and drive the Romans out and to give them back their freedom. So when Jesus is saying that he's not only coming back for the Jews, but also for the Gentiles, for the Romans, for the people that are oppressing them, this is what angers the people. So they take him from the synagogue, they drive him out, and they take him to a cliff. And they try to throw him off to stone him. But it says that Jesus simply turned around and walked through the crowd and left Nazareth. This is actually the last time recorded that we see Jesus in Nazareth. So we're going to continue out of the synagogue as well. If you guys want to take some quick pictures, you can do so quickly, and then let's let our next group come in after us. So once she's finished going through with the shovel, she takes this wooden comb and uses it to push up the string and make very even lines. So once she's finished weaving here, the finished product will look something like this, maybe a little less old than this one. And then with the extra pieces at the end, we can make things like this. Hannah, what do you call this?
Essentially Barbie dolls.
All right, well, let's give Hannah a hand.
I want to thank you. Thank you, Sabine. And I want to thank all of you for visiting me. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Out on his table here. So what he has in his hand right now is a chisel, and he's using a mallet with it as well. He actually has several different types of chisels of different shapes and sizes for different jobs. He also has a plane or a planer, if you can see here, an adze, which is a first century combination tool. We have a axe on one side, so you can use it this way to shave wood, and a hammer on the other side. What else do we have, Joseph? The planer, yes. Yes. The other? Do not miss it. So we bring the baskets and set them on this part of the press. This down here is a hole, so that's why the basket has a hole in the middle. The hole here is about half a meter deep, and when we place the baskets, we'll stack them about 10 high. And then using the weight from this pole, it uses like a pulley system, so we'll let it lower down onto the baskets, and then as it presses it, it'll get all the oil and water out from the pulp, and then it will drain into the hole below. And then since oil is lighter than water, when it rises up to the top, we simply lift it off, and then we're able to use it. It's not an original, but it is based off of a lot of the research that we've done. So this stone area that you can see beside me, this is our olive press. So as I mentioned earlier, the olives are harvested from around October to December. We bring them up here, and then we place them in this basin here that you can see. We'll usually have a donkey hooked up to this big beam here, so he would be hooked up around here. And then he will pull this big stone around the basin, and you can actually hear the sounds of the olives being crushed and this the sound of the olive pits popping. And so after we have crushed the olives here, we take the pulp, scrape it out from there, and we put it in a basket that looks like this. So this basket is specially made to press olives. We put the pulp of the olives in the sides of the basket like this. And then we take the baskets over to this part of the room for the next step of the process. So if you guys want to move over to the clay, mix it with water to prepare it to be made into water. He also talks about
Okay, this was the wine press. No, he is risen, not.
He is risen!
He is risen indeed. Oh, you have no idea. He is.
The village is on a hillside and had been preserved because it was part of either a college or some type of institution, and so they were able to find a wine press that goes back to the 1st century. Here is sheep, and there's a shepherd, and he explains why a shepherd, when he's out in the field, he will lay down, he will make up a little pen, and he will lay down at the entrance. And this is the illustration that Jesus uses in the first chapter of John, where a thief has to crawl over the shepherd to get to the sheep. Here's the hillside. Another picture of the hillside. Here's the olive press. This is where it's pressed initially, and this is where the olives are pressed again. Here's the shepherd. Here is the fire pit that they fire the pottery. Here's the carpenter. This lady was very sweet. She weaved, the person in the blue. Marcella talks to her a little bit later. Here I am with some of the boys. Here's the sweet lady that Marcella just fell in love with. She had a very sweet spirit. Here's the pottery. Harold with the shepherd. This is something to do with the thrashing board of wheat. Sweet lady making pottery. Here's things that have been woven. A scroll. The temple, or place for meeting in the community. Pottery. The shepherd. This is an olive tree, very old, as you can see. Here's Sabrina's favorite animal there, the donkey. And here is the entranceway.